Thank you. I always like doing light stuff right after lunch. This has nothing to do with the actual talk, but I do have a book coming out in April, When Comedy Goes Wrong. Second book. I guess it actually kind of does the theme of When Comedy Goes Wrong, kind of relates. So there it is. I don't have a picture of it, but you know, we have the web. So let's dive in. Everything human is pathetic. Mark Twain tells us in an epigraph before a chapter in Following the Equator, the travelogue he composed over a few years he spent on the road after filing for bankruptcy. The secret source of humor itself is not joy, but sorrow. There is no humor in heaven. So the words are Twain's, but Pudd'nhead Wilson is their mouthpiece. That character from a novel published the same year Twain went bust. In Following the Equator, Pudd'nhead established the framework for seeing officers and gentlepeople and convicts, the colonizers and the colonized, really for seeing everyone as part of the same human comedy. He offers us an attitude for taking care not only to extract the wisdom out of an experience, but also to take away the folly. That character who bore witness to the utter contradictions of white society and its heritage of enslavement, and who seemed to embody the thought to which Kurt Vonnegut later lent voice, that the only rule for humanity is this: God damn it, be kind. Or in Pudd'nhead Wilson's words, in Twain's, we need to be far humbler animals than we are. The redeeming quality of Twain's comic and indeed comical appeal, and the appeal I just expressed, is that even if heaven is devoid of humor, there is, thank God, thank goodness, humor in this fallen earth, and the figure of Satan can remind us of it by putting our sensibilities to the test. Whatever else it might have been, the Gilded Age was a devil of a time. Forgive the pun. For Twain, there were his infamous money problems, the loss of his eldest daughter, his wife. He was making money on the lecture circuit, so to speak, when Susie died, but he was world-weary. It was at this time that Twain began to articulate what W. Scott Poole calls the Satan mythos, typified on one hand by American devils who are not tricked out with horns and pitchforks, but are the greedy entrepreneur, the crabbed and bitter Puritan, the seducer whose only desire is the heated pursuit of desire itself. On the other hand, it was typified by Susie's death, which urged Twain to imagine every person's death as a blessing beyond fame, riches, pleasure, and even love, and pushed him to construe the death of a loved one as the pinnacle of human misery. He insinuated as much in a letter to Livy dated August 21st, 1896, and he said so bluntly in the 10th letter of Satan and Letters from the Earth. Life was not a valuable gift, but death was. Life was a fevered dream made up of joys embittered by sorrows, pleasure poisoned by pain, a dream that was a nightmare confusion of spasmodic and fleeting delights, ecstasies, exultations, happinesses. And all of them interspersed with long-drawn miseries, griefs, perils, horrors, disappointments, defeats, humiliations, and despairs, the heaviest curse divisible by divine ingenuity. Thus spake Satan. The figure of Satan has been largely deemed an iteration of Twain's dark, doleful satire. A reviewer of The Mysterious Stranger in 1962 characterized the narrative as the end point in Twain's cultivated contempt of the values of the human race. More recently, some have suggested that Twain came to simply accept Satan's notion that humor is a weapon against metaphysical, let alone all too human cruelties, as opposed to something that is ipso facto good for temporary pleasure and entertainment. Bad faith and good fun, maybe, or maybe the other way around. The problem here and elsewhere is that if Satan exemplifies, really embodies a sense of humor, then Twain's figurations trouble what is humorous or what incites laughter, as well as why it cannot be reduced to laughing matters. There's a common humanity to be found in the act and the art of being funny for the pure sake of having fun, but there is something utterly cruel, maybe even optimistically cruel, about the metaphysics, the mortality of it all. And there is something altogether haunting about the idea that humor is at its worst when it is weaponized, especially considering that it so often is. The idea that humor, our supposed salvation, is what Lauren Berlant and Cianyai might see today as our utmost comic failure. In early drafts of what is now The Mysterious Stranger, The Chronicles of Young Satan, Twain disabuses himself of the superficial comforts of the Gilded Age and its dreamlike society, and the sham spiritualism that seemed to come with modern conveniences of being human. More to the point, the great humorist even seemed to disabuse himself of humor. In April 1905, a letter to the editor appeared in Harper's Weekly. The letter was titled A Humane Word from Satan. At the top, over the salutation, there was an editorial disclaimer rendered in bold type. The following letter, it reads, signed by Satan and purporting to come from him, we have reason to believe was not written by him, but by Mark Twain. The sentiment expressed by this dark prince of comeuppance is short and bittersweet, coming off as if an exclamation point on the parade of criticism John D. Rockefeller had lately been receiving in the press for his so-called tainted money affair. Now, I can't get into the affair, but suffice it to say that in Twain's/Satan's letter, there is a clear condemnation of capitalism, of Rockefeller, and of all the evaders and lawbreakers who masquerade as philanthropists. Yet there is a humble, I guess, admission that all gifted money derives from the wages of sin. Therefore, says Satan, it is I that contributes it. So it is folly for an unwitting public at large to cry foul and exclaim, who the devil is Rockefeller, for instance? As Twain penned in the Revised Catechism 3 decades prior, what is the chief end of man? Answer, to get rich. In what way? Answer, dishonestly if we can, honestly if we must. Who is God? The one only and true? Answer, money is God. Gold and greenbacks and stock, Father, Son, and the ghost of the same. 3 persons in one. These are the true and only God, mighty and supreme. So I would ask, where does this leave us? Where is the sense of humor if it is lost to the horrors of self-consciousness and to the perils of self-righteousness or self-aggrandizement or self-indulgence? Never mind the perils of humoring ourselves in dark times. The simple truth for Twain is that all the creative energy in the world cannot help us overcome the cruel realities of creaturedom. Tranquilities, daydreams, pleasures, entertainments, these and other creature comforts can be fine and good. They can be funny when one is full of vim and verve. However, it is less the case when one is living out their dying days, reevaluating their selfhood, their self-worth, their membership in the human family, and maybe even more when one is reevaluating a sense of humor, not as the corrective for the human condition, but as a root of evil. That Twain's sense of humor became satanic is surely in part a result of his feeling that religion in general, and Christianity in particular, relied on snake oil. Then again, the figure of Satan was a crucial figure, and I might even say a comic figure, for redemption in the Gilded Age. As with the tainted money affair, I can't delve deep into that history either, but I can say that not long before Twain's time, Satan was the embodiment of a ghastly outcast, so think Milton's Paradise Lost. He was the incarnation of misery and troublemaking, Dante's Divine Comedy. However, in the 19th century, Satan became, in Eric Butler's words, a creature imbued with creative vigor, free expression, and a fiery temperament. He also took on what Sarah Bartles describes as secular, humorous, and prosaic forms that counteracted the otherwise terrifying or religious ones. So let's bring this even further forward. There's a scene from The Adventures of Mark Twain, or Comet Quest in Great Britain, a 1985 claymation film that portrays the great humorist by mashing together bits of his life's works to create a storyline that has him team up with Tom Sawyer, Becky Thatcher, and Huckleberry Finn to determine once and for all whether or not there is anything redeeming about humanity. In it, for a brief moment, the 4 seekers visit Satan on an Earth-like plane somewhere in the nether regions of space. Satan is an otherworldly, albeit humanoid figure who introduces himself as an angel and then proceeds to demonstrate to Tom, Becky, and Huck that life as we know it is merely a mirage. First, he tempts the children with their favorite fruits, then invites them to play in a sandbox, making clay people and molding a world for them to live in. And in lockstep, Satan enlivens them. They all watch as the clay people start off in solidarity, only to devolve into squabbling, babbling golems. Satan becomes agitated by their bickering. His face, which he holds as a mask affixed to the end of a long stick, morphs into a more and more devilish expression before he brings his red hand down upon an unlucky lot. The survivors of the human horde, formerly enraged, now mourn those they lost, until Satan inundates their world with a storm. Thunder rumbles, lightning flashes, fissures form, buildings crumble, more people perish, and the children look on in horror. And in what feels like a final judgment, the fantasy is revealed to be Twain's own torment. Satan speaks his last words, life is but a dream, existence is a vision, a thought. Satan says so as his own earthen figure spirals into nothingness, only to reappear as the pupil in one of Twain's eyes. And the scene offers a decent glimpse of the mysterious stranger, but more compelling is the image shown forth by director Will Vinton of Satan as Twain. At the beginning of the scene, when Satan introduces himself to the children, his face morphs from an expressionless, deadpan mask of the devil into the mug of Twain himself, mustache and all. Now, the Gilded Age was nothing if not an age of facades and veneers. Satan here is nothing if not a guise for humanity, a comic mask. Moreover, if the vision he offers is a comic vision, then there is much to suggest about Twain's sense of humor. When Satan is seen as the comic foil for a moral sense in The Mysterious Stranger and in Letters from the Earth, what emerges is a sense of humor that is misguided, misdirected, and misused, but maybe not condemnable. The moral sense, we are told, is what lifts human beings above beasts. We can distinguish between good and evil, right and wrong, and thus make judgments about how and why to act in certain ways. No, says Satan in The Mysterious Stranger. The moral sense is what, quote, degrades us to the bottom layer of animated beings, not least because our morality is precisely what goads us to claim lies as truths, vices as virtues. Twain lived then and we live today according to strange fictions, fetishized metaphysics and meta-narratives, really, that bind us to precepts about what Wendy Brown identifies as myths of progress, rights, sovereignty, free will, moral truth, reason. Consequently, it is the collective self-deception inspired by our moral sense that makes us distinctly human. This is not simply a comment on humanity. It is also, maybe even more so, a comment on the distinctly human sense of humor, in point of fact, Twain's own sense of humor, which is downright burdened by morality, beset with pink spiders and white elephants. Now, I say that because an allegory told by Satan in The Mysterious Stranger settles the case. He's going on about how a human being is a suffering machine and a happiness machine combined. Yet, says Satan, humanity is a red spider to an elephant, too remote, at too low a level to inspire anything but indifference. His sufferance is of no consequence to higher authorities. His joys likewise. Can you imagine, Satan asks, an elephant caring whether the spider is happy or isn't, or whether he is wealthy or poor, or whether he is looked up to in society or not, or whether his enemies will smite him or his friends desert him, or whether his hopes will suffer blight or his political ambitions fail, and on and on. These are trivialities to the elephant. What's funny, though, is that Twain betrays a few foolish flaws in Satan's allegory. One is that Satan is absolutely interested in humanity, even actively involved in it. Another is that human beings resemble the elephant more than the spider, in terms of presumed power, intellect, and dignity, for instance. And on the other, they resemble Satan himself. We look down on small things. We self-aggrandize. We cook up and conjure and conceive. Finally, like Satan, human beings think the world into reality. We imagine it into being with our silk threads and machines and pictures and embroideries, and crucially, our transactions. Fittingly, then, what astounds Satan is just how much humans make of their smallness. We let our imaginations run wild, and we, in a word, create, not unlike Satan. Although Satan makes a mockery of our creative acts, our human laws help us to stave off the creaturely impulse to eat and or be eaten. The spider kills the fly and eats it. The bird kills the spider and eats it. The wildcat kills the goose. They all kill each other. So observes the Satan of those earthly letters. To kill is natural. To kill with comedy, with humor, with laughter is, we tell ourselves, humane. But it's our moral sense, that most silly of human creations, that mucks it all up. The idea that we should be animals who give a hoot about the good or evil of this or that, the idea, well, here is the idea. Our sense of humor, our moral sense of humor, is the glit, the thin layer of pretension covering what lurks beneath the imagined worlds of our lived experiences. So when Satan laughs at us, he reveals how we might laugh at ourselves, and thus laughs off the fabricated fantasy worlds that fill us with dread, not to mention power, money, and persecution. Humor is bad for us when it is used to moralize, to cover, to conceal. Yes, it is our moral sense that compels us to use laughter as a weapon of destruction rather than a tool of creation. And so there is Satan in The Mysterious Stranger, making fun of humanity by mocking our moral sensibilities, our flawed sense of humor. He laughs at the myth of human progress. He laughs when advertising his free and scoffing ways. He laughs when people are happy. He laughs when people suffer. He laughs when his laughter shames and wounds people, as if his laughter... Sorry, I just zoomed in. Way too far. As if his laughter is an assault on us, our humanity. He laughs when people are incredulous about his name. He laughs when he sees that people realize that the substance of their moral sense, or what Satan dubs in Letters from the Earth, our vast array of moral qualities, is made of mud, not clay. Over and again, we are reminded that all is a dream, and that this should make us, as with Satan, burst out laughing. Not, however, if it means that we moralize by laughing at, or worse, laughing off, the vile things we do to ourselves. Rather, if it means, perhaps, that in Letters from the Earth, we might imagine ourselves encountering a Satan that punctuates the framework for a sense of humor about this whole setup and sets up my conclusion. The human animal is a peculiar creature. We are, Satan writes in his very first letter, deluded by figments of our own imagination. We imagine features like courage and fairness and justice and treachery and baseness and falsity and more in ourselves, and we imagine them to be God-given. Therefore, says Satan, we create diversions for ourselves. We sing, we pray, we pledge allegiance, we seek joyful bedlam in the products of our intellect. We prize sexual intercourse as a life-giving and at the same time an escapist pursuit. We make jokes. What we believe to be our noblest asset, that moral sense, is actually our basest instinct, the parent of all immoralities, which we never tire of issuing forth without a smile, whether in the name of love or hate, truth or lies. Accordingly, as Satan follows our earthly existence, much like Twain followed the equator, creating a travelogue of sorts about the follies of humankind, we get a sense of humor that raises the all-too-human stakes in adopting a comic mode of existence. The simple truth, Satan writes, is that the moral sense is the very thing that leaves not just human history, but also our sense of humor, red with blood and bitter with hate and stained with cruelties. It's the thing, Twain writes, that leads some, many, too many, to let pass how humorous is the notion that any one of us is less savage than other savages, and that there is something noble in this notion. Blessed are those who recognize that this sensibility is the corrupting condition. Too often we use or misuse humor in a confusion of the trivial with the sublime. Too often we utilize a comic spirit to overdetermine our nature as creatures of judgment. From letter to letter, we learn from Satan that human beings are flies in the ointment of humor, too eager to ingratiate themselves with immense sarcasms, as if they should be pursued like appetites, and abided by giant hypocrisies, as if any laws, even God's laws, could be anything but transactional. And throughout, we discover that Satan's decidedly non-moral stance allows him to conceive of the fall as no more and no less than a process of falling at our own feet. Make fun for sure, but know that the comic way is not the way of irony or critical distance. It is the way of deep, dreadful, humble attachment to the earth, for as long as one can be attached to it. No damnation of humor with faint praise here, just a gesture toward what it might mean in Satan's words, to praise its maker's name. It is in this way that Satan is non-moral. Want to live better and resist becoming a plaything in moralistic games? Be more like Satan. In other words, the moral of Twain's stories about a satanic sense of humor is that we do best when we remove altogether the morality from our humor, or when we utilize humor to clarify that moral sense, to expose it so that its tenets are not the precepts for humoring ourselves, but instead the stuff of comic visions that, like Satan, can haunt us. Hence Twain's satanic revelation, dream other dreams and better. So let us not fool ourselves into thinking that this is not a bit ironic, right? I mean, the Gilded Age was an odd time for moralizing about demoralizing. After all, in hindsight, it represents the failures of Reconstruction, the institutionalization of government corruption, societal rot in the names of economic growth, fomented by moguls and merchant princes and financial magnates, and in historian Ian Tyrrell's words, the wrongful tenets of America's moral empire. Twain lived through this age. He lived and wrote and worked and grieved in a space between the dystopian and utopian fantasies of America's false promise. Perhaps he should have known better. But alas, the devil is not simply the oldest friend of knowledge, as Nietzsche might suggest. The devil is the oldest friend of humor, only, though insofar as both the satanic sensibility and the sense of humor that derives from it can remain outside of morality. This is what it means to imagine a sort of devilishness and a sense of humor. Simply, Twain's satanic sense of humor establishes a basis for proclaiming that one day, if we are lucky, we will wake up and find that morality is dead and we have killed it. Thank you.